Good morning, everybody who has joined. Thank you. My name is Holland Atkinson. I'm the Director of Labor Relations for the City of Minneapolis. I do want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded, so we will have it available for future release. I want to thank you for attending this virtual session being held to provide a summary related to the listening sessions held over the summer that gave the public an opportunity to provide input on the City of Minneapolis and Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis contract negotiations. Like I said, my name is Holland Atkinson and I'm the Director of Labor Relations for the city. We have a brief agenda for this meeting. We're going to go over the background. I'm going to provide some summary information. I'm also going to point to where to provide feedback and where we're going to be getting updates, and then what some of the next steps are for the city. In terms of the background, during the negotiation for the current collective bargaining agreement, also known as a contract between the City of Minneapolis and the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis, that I will just refer to as the Federation, for this contract period, 2020 through 2022, the public was seeking ways to provide opinions on items to be negotiated. A series of listening sessions were held during the summer of 2022 to assist the city in achieving the goal of receiving public input on the Federation contract negotiations. These were in-person sessions, and they were held at the following locations. The first was at the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Park Building on Nicollet Avenue. The second was at the Falwell Park Building on Dowling Avenue. And then the last was at the Whittier Park Recreation Center on West 26th. During these sessions, the city provided educational material on collective bargaining in the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis. I'll recap some of the educational topics discussed by just asking a question and responding to it. And the first question is, what is a contract? A collective bargaining agreement, also known as a contract, it's an agreement between an employer and a group of employees who negotiate together. The group of employees is often called a union, but can also be called an association, or in this case, with the Minneapolis Police, a federation. The contract between the employer and the union sets the terms and conditions of employment. So then that leads to the next question, why is there a contract? And the state of Minnesota allows for all public sector employees the right to organize and freely choose their union representative. This right is found in Chapter 179A of the Minnesota statutes known as the Public Employment Labor Relations Act, or I'll just refer to it as PELRA. The city of Minneapolis has 22 bargaining units, and the Police Officers Federation is one of them. So the Federation and city have a contract in place, and it expires at the end of the year on December 31st. We'll be starting negotiations for a new contract with the hopes of reaching an agreement in the spring. Per PELRA, police are what's known as an essential group of employees. That's a term of art inside of this statute. That means they are prohibited by law from going on strike if a new contract cannot be reached voluntarily. Because of that, if the city and federation do not agree on a new contract during regular bargaining, the matter is sent to mediation, where a state-appointed neutral mediator, a third party, helps the two parties reach an agreement. If no agreement is reached in mediation, the matter is sent to what's known as binding interest arbitration, where an arbitrator decides the terms of the party's new contract. In interest arbitration, both the city and federation make their position for what they feel the contract should include and what it should be. It's kind of like a court hearing, but less formal, and both sides get to present evidence or testimony to support their matter. The arbitrator decides on the new contract terms and the parties must implement them. So some of the things that are negotiated, state law allows for what's known as terms and conditions to be bargained. So it's a technical term, but generally it means pay, benefits, and policies that impact the employee's working conditions. And what things are not negotiated is just as important. One of the more important things that we want to stress as a city is that it does not negotiate what PELRA defines as inherent managerial policy, sometimes known as management rights. It includes, but it's not limited to, the function of a program, the budget, utilization of technology, and selection and number of personnel. The city wants to keep policies out of the contracts so it has flexibility in implementing change without having to negotiate every time. There are also things that the city must agree to that are part of current state law. For example, state law requires the parties to have a grievance process. This is a way for employees through their union to assert that their contract was violated. It's known as a grievance. You might hear about that when discipline is imposed by the Minneapolis Chief of Police. Police officers also have additional legal protections and procedures which apply to discipline. The city must comply with those laws. Current state law further requires the parties agree to having what is known as binding arbitration in our contracts for all discipline grievances. That means that if the city and the union don't agree on how to resolve a grievance, it can go to arbitration. Both sides present their case to an arbitrator. The city and the union must comply with the arbitrator's decision. So with that baseline on public education regarding public sector collective bargaining in the state of Minnesota, we then asked the community to provide input on some of the interests they had. To ensure that we had consistent topics, the city asked the public who arrived at the listening sessions to provide input on 3 primary issues: recruitment and retention, mental health, and accountability. I'll be going over those in a moment. The city also offered a webpage to supply feedback on those same topics, along with the ability for the public to provide input on any other topics that they felt were important in this process. So regarding the first one, recruitment and retention of police officers, as I said during the listening sessions, and some of you may be familiar with this, police officers have a unique skill set which is in high demand across the state and nation. The city wants community-minded people who meet our requirements to join our police department. Current qualifications to be a police officer in Minneapolis include state-mandated skills training and hiring requirements. An associate degree in law enforcement is also required. The market for these skills has become very competitive, and the city must focus on ways to recruit and retain police officers. The second topic that I want to touch on is the mental health issue that we were discussing earlier. Policing is a difficult profession. It exposes police officers to stressful situations and disturbing events. The city and Federation have a shared interest in making sure police officers maintain good mental health. This allows for better service for the residents and businesses and visitors to the city. The city and Federation continue to work towards ways to improve mental health for the future. And then the last thing is accountability. The city and the Federation also have an interest in making sure police officer conduct is professional and respectful. This allows for trust between the residents and the officers responsible for policing. We all agree that accountability for misconduct is a key concern. All employees deserve a fair and consistent process for disciplinary actions. All public sector contracts in Minnesota require specific provisions regarding the ability of police officers to appeal discipline, like I had mentioned earlier. The city keeps discipline policy outside of the contract, also I mentioned earlier, and that allows for the city to maintain flexibility in those policies. The city appreciates the thoughtful comments and input received. Hundreds of statements were received during the process. There was a wide range of input and subjects considered by the public. Many of the items received are not subjects of collective bargaining, but rather items that might be established through policy. And additionally, a lot of the topics that were raised were actually legal matters, and those also wouldn't be subjects to collective bargaining. But I do want to highlight some of the key issues that the public was seeking. The first was 2 separate bargaining units, one for police officers and another for sergeants and lieutenants. The second was increases in compensation to attract quality candidates. The third was an ongoing mental health evaluation of police officers. The fourth was increased mental health benefits for our officers. The public offered many other valuable suggestions that would be appropriate for other forums. The city will continue to evaluate them and determine if they're appropriate for policy changes. Many other items, like I mentioned earlier, were legal matters and would require legislative action. And the city will consider these for future goals with our partners at the state and federal level. In order to keep you and the community current on some of the actions the city is taking, I want to provide you one important update. Recently, the city filed a petition known as a unit clarification petition with the Minnesota Bureau of Mediation Services, known as the BMS, to ask for the police bargaining unit to be split in two, one unit with officers and one unit with sergeants and lieutenants. We believe the bargaining unit should reflect the rank and responsibility of its members. We believe it is appropriate for officers to be in a separate bargaining unit from sergeants and lieutenants. If the petition is successful, we will negotiate separate contracts with each of the bargaining units. This is consistent with how other cities operate. It's something the community has asked for, as I just stated above. And it's something that the mayor has been talking about for years. Should you want to provide additional feedback on the police officers' labor agreement negotiation, please send those comments to labor.relations@minneapolismn.org. And again, recall that all items that are sent, they will be received and be considered a part of the public record, just as this recording, this particular meeting is, like I said earlier, being recorded and will also be available. So this report that I will explain some of the high-level findings that we just went over will be available on the Labor Relations website, that key findings report. In addition, for the next steps coming up, the unit clarification petition process, that first has to be completed. Then negotiations on a new contract or contracts will begin. And the city is planning to continue to provide updates on our website, and many of you have found that website, the Labor Relations and Contract Negotiation website on the city website. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to engage with the city on this important topic. The feedback received over the summer and in the previous years has been a valuable tool for evaluating interest in the community, and we hope that you'll continue to work with the city as we strive to provide you the best possible service. Again, this will be recorded and posted online for future access, and I thank you all for joining this meeting.